Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, I got a fun and exciting video for you guys today because we are playing the recently released remake of the first case from Phoenix Wright, the original game, all the way down to Game Boy and Game Boy Studio. And to say that this absolutely works as a remake, and I think might even be more charming than the actual original release game would be an understatement. Something about Phoenix Wright in 8-bit in black and white with all of the different shading just 100% hits. And just so you know, this is only the first case, the first turnabout, but it kind of is an example of what can be done on Game Boy in 2026 and absolutely shows that that little handheld has a metric crap ton of horsepower left in the tank when you get actual talented developers playing around with it. So 2-Bit Crook, you absolutely did an amazing job on this one, and I'm excited to talk about it. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. And honestly, demakes are very interesting projects because right now we talk a lot about different decomps, recomps, and PC ports, especially on the N64 side of things. But actually demaking retro games onto less powerful hardware is a lot of fun because it allows for basic constraints in the development process. What that means is when you don't have all the horsepower in the world, when you don't have all the colors in the world, you have to be very creative and selective as to how to bring an entire experience across on less powerful hardware. And those constraints, whether it's in art, and I use them all the time, or even in technology, those constraints actually breed innovation because when you have a limited tool set and restrictions placed upon you, you have to be concise and intelligent in not only how you design something, but how you kind of rework it. So this is definitely 100% successful, and 2-Bit Crook has done an amazing job of taking a game and bringing it all the way down to the original Game Boy. And just so you know, if you love Phoenix Wright, this is something that's going to be 100% for you, whether you love the original games or some of the most recent games. And if you've never been a fan of the franchise, there's nothing really here in the Game Boy remake that's going to convince you suddenly to fall in love with something that you didn't love back in the day. These were always great games to play on the train or in between classes when I was in college or even on planes, because you could kind of take them as bite-sized pieces and come back and jump right back into the story. And it's one of those things, I played a lot of these in like the 2010s and so, but I've kind of fallen off as far as visual novels are concerned, which this definitely would be one. But the Zero Escape games, stuff like Danganronpa, stuff like Phoenix Wright, always entertained me, and I always loved playing them when I was going back and forth between work and college in Chicago or traveling around for work. And had this existed on the original Game Boy back in the day, it would have 100% gotten straight up 10 out of 10s. Now, of course, mechanically, the game is going to be the same because it is still the first case. What I really want to focus on here is just the art technology behind this, because these absolutely look like massive sprites. Even if they might be background layers, I'm not 100% sure how they are put together, but the animation on the facial expression here 100% tells the story, and even though this game was never intended to be in black and white, it absolutely works. And I will say, the artist here going over all of the different colors, or lack thereof, that you can make in black, white, and gray, has done an exceptional job. You can see the depth in the image. You have the characters here popping out with a darker use of black and even white, and all of the text looks incredible as well. And this is not something easy to do because when you have a full color palette, you can really define depth and overall image and really give people an idea of what it is they're looking at. In black and white, that does require more thinking whether you're actually shooting on film or on a cinema camera or even in a video game, because suddenly you have to work on shadow and the difference between black and pure white when it comes to actually putting in that depth or overall image into a game or a film. And I will say this absolutely is 100% successful. It just works. But you leave me your comment down below and you tell me, Phoenix Wright fan, yes or no? And seeing a remake in Game Boy in black and white, yes or no? Because I would be really curious about this one. And I hope the developer here actually brings this out into a full game, because I would love to see the entirety of this game brought over to the original Game Boy, because I think the aesthetic here is just 100% working, and it actually makes the game, in my opinion, slightly more charming, because it is the game that I know, love, and remember, but honestly it's been so long since I played it, I forget how this case goes as well. So kind of playing around in the background, a big thanks to Kilter Music for helping with some of the captures, really enamored me with it one more time. But of course the demake's also going to be the music, so here's our first soundtrack sample, and I'll be right back with a lot more info. Now, I would say the developer here has been as successful at bringing the music down to the Game Boy as they have the visuals, and I will say probably the music is the harder of the two, because obviously the Game Boy has a very specific sound aesthetic and hardware. I always love to say on Game Boy videos, it can make exactly 3 noises, a beep, a boop, and a bop, and you have to combine different tones and different volumes of those beep, boops, and bops to be able to make an entire soundtrack. So of course, on paper, this soundtrack would be quote-unquote a downgrade, but it absolutely sounds like the music from Phoenix Wright. It does give a tone and kind of a vibe to the court case, and I think it absolutely works. But really, it is the facial expressions and animations here that 100% sell everything, including the jury shaking their head yes or no, and that gavel coming down. This looks better than basically almost any Game Boy game that ever came out back in the day, and it just shows just how much horsepower is left in that little handheld. And this is why I want to see more projects focusing on the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, but maybe the Game Boy in specific, because I love a black and white aesthetic, whether it's the Wonder Swan or the original Game Boy. There's just something very dynamic and unique about black and white art, especially when you take into account all of the different shading. And I'm sure this wasn't easy whatsoever, bringing over the entirety of the game, because all the logic is here as well, and there are directions in the readme on how to control everything, because of course, going back to the Game Boy, you don't have as many buttons, but it 100% works from start to finish. I played this case through, and I'm trying to keep spoilers out here if you've never actually played it before, and it just works. All I want to see is this game absolutely hit the finish line if that is the developer's intent. It was basically made for a tech demo showing just how much this software development kit and new software can do for the Game Boy, and that really is part of this as well. Basically, almost every single console is seeing new tools made, whether it's this year, last year, or in 2024, where you can basically make so many new and exciting experiences for this retro hardware. Because for the longest time, it was basically a domain of ROM hacks until some of these new software development kits actually came out, because the tool set that would have been used to develop these games back in the day was ever actually released online, and even if it was, more modern tooling is going to give you a better Game Boy experience. But just look at the facial expression, look at all the contours there, pun very much intended, and it just works. And as cross-examination comes in, the text flies in, has a little bit of a glow again. This has all of the vibe of Phoenix Wright 100% downgraded over to the Game Boy. And in a lot of ways, yes, this is technically a downgrade or a demake, but in a lot of ways it also feels like an upgrade to me. There's just something absolutely enamoring about the black and white aesthetic. But you tell me down below, is it working for you? Because I would be curious. And again, don't forget, I am a filmmaker for a living, a director, but mostly a director of photography. So the overall interplay between black and white, color and shadow, light and dark is just something I absolutely fixate on, because that is my career. I spent a lot of time in college learning it, and a lot of time out in the field dealing with it, with actually a specialty in action sports cinematography, which puts a whole nother kind of compounding difficulty on it, because the color white is the color snow, and having to deal with that and color at the same time, always hard. But I've definitely zagged hard enough on that little story time there, so let's go into the second soundtrack sample, because again, may reduced in quality but not in fun. I mean, that sounds great to my ears, but you tell me what you think down below. And the only wrong way to play this Phoenix Wright remake is not to play it in the first place, because this is why retro gaming is making a comeback. And you can play this any way you want. You can play it on real Game Boy hardware, you can play it on Game Boy software emulation, Mr. FPJ, or Analog Pocket, and that definitely is a good time. But I will say, I absolutely love the look of this on my OLED TV with my Mr. FPJ, because those inky blacks in OLED just absolutely make this thing shine. And if you're watching on an OLED screen, maybe you'll get a little bit of that here. But honestly, I love projects like this. They are fun, they are creative, and again, constraints breed innovation. Because when you're given every single tool in the tool bag, sometimes the choice of what to actually use becomes very difficult. But when all you have is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. And when all you have is a Game Boy, 2-Bit Crook absolutely nailed the conversion when it comes to Phoenix Wright in 8-bit black and white. Hope you enjoyed the dad joke, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.